Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the August 14th, 2025 meeting of the Seattle Planning Commission. As we begin our meeting, we respectfully acknowledge that our meeting today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respect to the Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous people today. It is also to recognize these lands, waters, and their significance for the resilient and wise peoples who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in the city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using the various forms of wealth privilege that they reap due to it. Okay, my name is Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Seattle Planning Commission. Let's see, we are happy to make all commission meetings open to the public. Please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since the Commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely, like myself, and others in person in the boards and commissions room at Seattle City Hall. All right. Let's see the Color Brave space norms. I would like to invite a commissioner to choose and briefly speak to one of our Color Brave space norms that they feel have particular relevance to today's agenda. And then if there are let's start with that. Can I have somebody volunteer to speak on one of these norms?
I'll volunteer.
All right, thank you.
I think keep focused on our collective goal, create racial justice through Black liberation and Native sovereignty. Feels relevant for this meeting, but also just kind of the phase that we're in with the comp plan. It's been a long process. It has strong values and intentions behind it, and keeping those at the forefront as we sort of evaluate the amendments and help the city finally finish this process this fall. Those are relevant.
Right. Thank you. Let's see if there are any amendments or modifications, or if there are no amendments or modifications to these norms, I suggest that we all agree to them. Any amendments? No. Okay. All right. Let's do a round of introductions. Let's see. I think so I've already introduced myself, so I'm going to pass the mic back to Zio as co-chair.
Hi, Zio Alvarez, she, they pronouns. I live in White Center, Highland Park, and I work as a designer at an architecture firm downtown. And I co-chair the planning commission. Thank you.
Michaela Daffrin, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning.
Andy Dannenberg, he, him, live in Northeast Seattle, and I teach at the University of Washington in urban planning and in public health.
Rebecca Brune, she, her pronouns. I live in Crown Hill, and in my day job, I am the senior project manager for transit-oriented development for Sound Transit. Oh, I will. We're going to keep it in the room or go to the commissioners?
Well,
online?
let's go to the commissioners, and that's my fault. I forgot to note that it's a good idea to bring your laptop when you come to these meetings because we have commissioners on. So I will go ahead and call on Diana.
Hi, good afternoon. Diana Quintanar, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I'm a multimodal transportation planner. I'll pass it over to Dylan G.
Hi, Dylan Glosecki. He, him pronouns. I live in Central District and am an architect and urban designer in my day job. Pass it on to, let's see who hasn't gone, Dylan Stevenson.
Dylan Stevenson, he, they pronouns. I live in the Belltown neighborhood and I teach urban planning at University of Washington. I will pass it along to Caleb.
Hi everyone, Caleb Twolde, he, him pronouns. I live in Beacon Hill and I'm an educator at Rainier Scholars. And I'll pass it to Matthew Malloy.
Hey y'all, Matt Malloy, he, him pronouns. I live in Green Lake and work at a restaurant and substitute teach. I'm gonna have my camera off since I'm commuting to work. And I will be passing, I think, to Nick. Has not gone yet.
Hey everyone, Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I live in West Seattle in the North Del Ridge neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a city planner on the east side. Think back to staff.
Robin?
Hi, Robin McGonigal. I am staff for the Planning Commission, and I live on Vashon Island, and I use she, they pronouns.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Olivia Baker, she, her pronouns, and I'm staff coach.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Hoy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission.
And I'll wrap us up. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns, and I am staff to the commission as well. And with that, I will turn it back to Matt.
Great. Let's see. On the agenda today, we have one item, which is a working session for the commission to develop comments for City Council's proposed amendments to the One Seattle Plan and the permanent legislation to implement House Bill 1110. Before we get to that, a couple of things. First, we need to approve the minutes for the July 11th meeting. So first, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved, Michaela.
Thank you.
Second.
Zio seconds.
Okay, great. Any changes or amendments to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, either raise your hand or say aye.
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 All right. Do we have any opposed? I don't see any, hear any. Any abstentions? Okay. The minutes are approved. Okay. Upcoming commission meetings. Next Thursday, we have the Land Use and Transportation Committee. We'll be meeting from 7:30 to 9 a.m. Online via the Teams platform. And then our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 28th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And this will be another hybrid meeting with some individuals participating, excuse me, remotely and some in the boards and commissions room at Seattle City Hall. I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa for some announcements.
Thanks, Matt. As Matt noted, this is a hybrid meeting, so we have a few planning commissioners here in the boards and commissions room of City Hall, Seattle City Hall, and the remainder of our commissioners are participating online. During the meeting, there will be opportunities for questions and comments from commissioners. We're going to be using the chat function for commissioners to be recognized to speak. We will have a discussion queue that I will help Matt monitor. For those commissioners in the room, you please do join the chat or raise your hand. I'll keep my eye on the room and enter people into the chat if they're not able to do so. And I'd like to remind everybody that the chat function is not for substantive discussion, but rather to be recognized to speak, because not all members of the public have access to the chat. If they're just dialing in, they won't be able to see the chat. So we don't want to have any substantive comment in the chat, just your name. We have a couple of different ways that we provide opportunities for public comment. We welcome public comment. Public comment can be emailed to me. You could advance one.
Sure.
Thank you. Up on the screen in a minute, there will be instructions or opportunities for how to provide public comment. So public comment can be emailed to me in advance of the meeting, and then I will read it. Or public comment can be provided in person if you choose to join us in the Boards and Commissions room. And for those of you on the call who are members of the public who are on the call, who, if you would like to if you would like to offer public comment, please either raise your hand in Teams, and if you happen to be calling in, please email me at Vanessa.Murdock, that's VANESSA.MURDOCK and let me know your name and the phone number you're calling from so you may be recognized to speak. I didn't receive any emails in advance of this meeting, so there are no emails for me to read into the public comment record. I'm just going to check my email now to see if anybody has emailed me wanting to provide public comment. I'm not seeing any email. And I'm also checking the chat, and I'm not seeing any members of the public who are joining us who would like to speak. So Matt, you don't need to read the portion of public comment because we don't have any members. And I'm just going to go right into commission business, and then we'll turn it back to Matt, and we will get to our one agenda item. Don't have a lot of commission business. I did want to note that the Port of Seattle has some, they're calling it Port University sessions that John emailed the commission about. A number of them are already full. So that would be the Airport 101, Cargo 101, and the Environmental 101. The Duwamish 101 and Ship Canal 101 sessions are still open. Those are in-person options or activities that the port offers. So John can resend that link for those who might be interested in joining. And then the other item of business is just a reminder to commissioners, a little bit of administrivia here. When Robin sends out an email a week in advance of the meeting with the draft agenda, and asks for commissioners to reply, it's really helpful for staff if you can reply as quickly as possible to that email so that we know we can be assured we're going to have quorum. And I will note one of the reasons why it's important to respond to that email, in addition to, you probably accepted the Outlook invitation maybe months ago when that series was first sent. So we don't rely on that to ascertain your participation. And that will also save Robin time and save space in your inbox so she doesn't have to keep emailing everybody to ask if you're coming. So that concludes a little bit of administration commission business, and I will turn it back to Matt. Oh, sorry.
Quick comment on the Port U visits. John signed me up for the Ship Canal one. I had previously done the airport and the cargo ones, and they're really interesting. It's like an hour or two. They take you around, show what's going on. So if you haven't done them, they're really nice. Have you done them?
I have not. I believe
really
John
nice.
has.
I have.
I'm going to the Duwamish one, 20.
Which?
I'm doing Duwamish.
Okay.
And Cargo.
September.
End of the year, signed up for Ship Canal.
Yes.
And I'll be on that.
Oh, you will? Okay, good.
Great. Thanks for the plug, Andy.
Cool.
Back to you, Matt.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's get to our one item of business, which is the working session with regards to the proposed amendments to the One Seattle Plan and also the permanent legislation to implement HB 1110. So staff is going to walk us through, Olivia's going to walk us through probably the initial proposed comments based on our past work. We have up to 2 hours, if need be, to discuss this topic. Let's see, and I'm going to turn it back over to Vanessa and Olivia.
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt. I also would just like to note for commissioners and any members of the public, Matt, who is co-chairing the meeting, is sick with COVID. And so kudos to him for rallying to chair this meeting today. And Matt, if you need to step away, just let us know. And Zio's at my side and she can step in and help.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to collapse. I may need to go get some water, but
okay,
I think
don't collapse on us. Okay, thanks. All right, I just have some opening comments and then I'm going to turn it over actually to John, who's going to walk us through the presentation today. John, if you could advance, thank you so much. Just an orientation of City Council's timeline for making and entertaining and discussing proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan and the accompanying implementing legislation for House Bill 1110, otherwise known as the Middle Housing Bill. So on August 4th, City Council proposed 106 amendments to the comprehensive plan and that implementing legislation. They are not holding another meeting until September 12th, at which point at that meeting will actually be a public hearing. So it is unlikely that there will be conversation and discussion among council members. It is really just an opportunity for them to hear from members of the public. Then October 17th through 19th, there's a meeting scheduled on the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th of the City Council Select Committee to discuss and vote on the One Seattle Plan and permanent legislation to implement House Bill 1110. I am not aware of any plans to post any revisions to an amendment package prior to the public hearing or prior to the select committee vote or meetings on the 17th, 18th, and 19th. So we and other members of the public and other bodies looking at these proposed amendments are responding to those amendments that were introduced at the August 4th City Council meeting. The final city vote on the One Seattle Plan and permanent legislation will occur in October or November, as there may need to be additional environmental review on the plan and legislation that is voted by the Select Committee on September 17, 18, and or 19. Early in 2026, Council will take up legislation on centers and corridors. And then in late 2026, Council will take up regional center zoning as part of the annual amendment process. So as a reminder to folks, when we are not in the process of a major update to the comprehensive plan, which we have been in that process for the last 2 years, Council can invite members of the public to propose amendments to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan can only be amended once a year. So we are anticipating that there will be an annual amendment process next year, assuming that the comp plan is approved this year.
How are 100 amendments handled? Do they get equal time? Do some get either shot down or accepted readily? Or do you know what the processes are?
I'll try to speak to that, and then John's going to walk through after I talk about what the strategy is, what the commission strategy is for preparing comments on the amendments. So the amendments that were published or that were introduced at the August 4th City Council meeting, that was the first time council members were even seeing them. There was not the time for consultation amongst council members. So if you look back through the 434-page document that I emailed all the commissioners on August 4th, you'll see there is some redundancy. You'll also see that some amendments are actually in contradiction with each other. So that is something that city council and very, very busy and diligent city council central staff are trying to address before the 16th, as city council goes on, takes the second half of August off. So city council offices are closed between the 16th of September and September 1st, sorry, 16th of August and September 1st. So it's really been since the 4th through tomorrow that council has had the opportunity to meet with Chair Hollingsworth. She's the chair of the select committee on the comprehensive plan, and discuss with each other. So we are anticipating that we might see some amendments removed, or some amendments consolidated, but without a clear path to know when that will be released to members of the public, we are just assuming we need to treat the amendments that we've seen as ones that possibly may move forward.
Would now be another good time to ask for the questions on timeline.
Sure.
Mine's more of a observation. I don't think you'll know the answer to this, but recently there's been two just final orders and decisions coming down from the Growth Management Hearings Board. They were both appeals from the petitioners for FutureWise in both cases. One is about appealing Kitsap County's comprehensive plan, and another was appealing Mercer Island's comprehensive plan. And the Mercer Island appeal in particular is pretty, it could be potentially impactful, in particular to jurisdictions who have not yet adopted their comprehensive plans. And so I think everybody's digesting what it means. But for Mercer Island, it suggests that they were not allowed to count that. They needed to project the unit yield that they would get from their capacity at or below 80% of AMI. And identify either incentive programs that would create those units or subsidy that would create those units and ensure that they were available and affordable to low-income households in those income levels. And if that is the correct interpretation, and the order stands and is not appealed, it may suggest Seattle may need to do something similar, and which may suggest that their abundant surplus of capacity may be a substantial deficit if they can't demonstrate that incentive programs like inclusionary zoning or the housing levy are sufficient to ensure that those units will be actually not just zoned to exist, but also that they're making adequate provisions for those units to exist. So just, we're in a weird moment of time that I think might slow down this process if the legal staff at the city of Seattle decide that there are implications for their plan.
Thanks for raising that, Michaela, and for keeping an eye on that. I don't know how city council is factoring that in to their deliberations. I do know that those appeals are on the radar of planning staff at the Office of Planning and Community Development.
Yeah.
I know that city council is having to weigh a lot of different things as they are contemplating approving a plan that with amendments that might trigger additional environmental review. And if that environmental review is significant enough that it requires a supplemental EIS, then that would slow down the approval process to probably push it into next year. And that would jeopardize or compromise or have an impact on one of those three funds that the Puget Sound Regional Council passes through to jurisdictions that have approved their plan. So I don't know how city council is weighing all of that.
Yeah.
And my suggestion for commissioners is to, and we'll get into this as we get into our strategy and our timeline for providing comments on proposed amendments. My suggestion is not to get too in the weeds on the environmental review or the growth management hearing board decision on Kitsap and Mercer Island, primarily because with the amendments that were proposed on August 4th, and there's got to be a winnowing down because there is redundancy there. And it's simply information that we don't have on hand to be able to respond to in terms of at the August 4th council meeting. A council member asked specifically several times the question of central staff, which of these amendments would trigger a supplemental EIS as opposed to just an addendum to the EIS. And central staff correctly replied, until they and the law department see the full package of amendments, they're not able to say this amendment would definitely trigger supplemental review or this one wouldn't, because the amendments in themselves might be mitigating themselves, if that makes sense. So rather than rather than use the lens of whether amendments will trigger environmental review or not, because we don't have the information at hand, I'm suggesting the commission not weigh in on that. And we'll get a little bit more into that as John goes through a more detailed description of the proposed amendments. And he's not going to go through all 106, which are now 108. Next slide, please.
I prepared 110.
So just a reminder of our timeline, because we just went over council's timeline. So the amendments became available last Monday. Last week we had a meeting with the executive committee and our housing and neighborhoods committee meeting. At those meetings, at the executive meeting, we discussed a strategy for wrapping our collective arms around these amendments and providing feedback not only to council, but to members of the public who might be following what the Planning Commission thinks, and really aiming for a vote on a comment letter at our September 4th Housing and Neighborhoods Committee meeting. And that would be a week in advance of the council hearing. So at least our comments would be out there in the wide, beautiful world for a week for people to be able to review. That does leave us with just a handful of meetings as a body to discuss, develop, and fine tune a comment letter. And you'll see on the screen that after today, we only have 4 meetings before the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee meeting. Some of those meetings are very close to each other. So as we get closer to that September 4th meeting, there won't be really an opportunity for a substantive change to the letter. I encourage all commissioners who are able to participate in the upcoming meetings to do so. Given the compressed time frame, these meetings, typically our meetings are iterative, and we will revisit what we talked about at a previous meetings to bring everybody up to speed. In this case, though, these meetings are really additive, so we do not have the luxury of time to revisit decisions that were made in previous meetings. So we will staff will do our best to brief everybody at each of these meetings where what was decided at the previous meeting, in case for those people who weren't able to attend, and then we'll use that as a starting point as opposed to revisiting past decisions. I've got one more slide to speak to, and then I'm going to turn it over to John. So last week at the executive committee meeting, we discussed and agreed to an approach to our letter to basically in 3 big chunks. To start off, really acknowledging the amount of thorough and intentional work done by city staff, done by the planning department over the last 2.5 years to develop and revise the plan. There were a number of open houses. There were a number that were by district. Commissioners went and attended at least the open house that was in their district, and many commissioners actually went to more than one. And we really want to note that lead with, this has been a long process, and to introduce this number of amendments really at the 11th hour is troublesome. And Then we're going to move on to focus on the proposed amendments that address issues the commission has voiced support on to date. So there are a number of amendments that touch on things the commission hasn't talked about, and we decided we're not even going to look at those because we don't have time to have a discussion around items that we haven't discussed to date. Then our third section of the letter will note strong support for the establishment of neighborhood centers throughout the city, emphasizing how neighborhood centers help achieve the vision of Seattle we want to see, as noted in the One Seattle plan. We are not proposing to talk about each individual neighborhood center proposed amendment. But staff did go through and looked at each of them and sent to the commission on Saturday, actually, a chart that noted each of the proposed amendments, the gain or loss in acreage, and whether or not that amendment has had previous environmental study. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and I think our proposal, unless there's an objection, is for John to go through the full presentation and then circle back and take questions and then move into discussion. So, thanks, everyone.
Okay. So some of this will look very familiar to those of you who attended last Thursday's Housing and Neighborhoods Committee. Many of these slides were presented at that meeting. A little bit of information has changed since then, and then we have added slides that I will get into on the neighborhood centers at the end of the presentation. So I will just go through. I don't have 110 slides, luckily, but there are quite a few. So I'll go through them, and then we'll take a break and have questions and discussion. So yeah, as Vanessa introduced, the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan introduced the amendments on both the One Seattle Plan and the Phase 1 zoning legislation, or the permanent legislation to implement HB 1110, and that was on August 4th. There were 53 amendments to the One Seattle Plan. Those included both text amendments as well as map and text amendments to the centers that included new neighborhood centers, boundary changes to previously proposed neighborhood centers, and urban center. For some reason, there were 53 amendments to the permanent legislation to implement HB 1110. Those were categorized by central staff, city council central staff, for everyone's convenience. And that's how we will be discussing those, are in these categories where appropriate. Under accessory dwelling units, affordable housing, corner stores, density and height, parking, stacked flats, trees, amenity areas, and setbacks. And as Vanessa mentioned, we will only be discussing amendments that meet, that are under themes that the Planning Commission has previously commented on or has previously discussed. So we won't be highlighting amendments within all of those categories necessarily, but we will be seeing some in many of those categories. Since August 4th, specifically on August 8th, we received information that there were some new changes to the amendments. 2 amendments had been removed. 2 amendments had been corrected, and there were 4 new amendments that were introduced. And I will highlight a few of those amendments at the very end.
John, can you pause for a moment? Sorry, I see in the chat, Zio has.
I was just going to ask if we know the details of those amendments that are altered or new, but
yeah,
you're going to get to it.
I have notes.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, Let's see how I can get to it. If I can get to those. Let's see. Okay. The two amendments that were withdrawn, one was an amendment on expanding the stack flat bonus proposed by Councilmember Hollingsworth. And if anyone remembers, there were several versions of an expanding stack flat bonus amendment. So perhaps that, not to speculate because we don't have any information, but there may have been some redundancy. The other amendment that was withdrawn was an amendment by Councilmember Strauss that defined tree protection areas as a 6-foot radius from the tree. The two amendments that were corrected, one is by Councilmember Hollingsworth that provided policy direction regarding food access. And the other one that was corrected was by Councilmember Kettle, and it was mostly just a typo that was correcting the title of the urban center. It was previously called out as the Upper Queen Anne Urban Center, when in fact it is just the Queen Anne Urban Center. There were three that were introduced, new amendments that were introduced by Councilmember Hollingsworth that I will share with you. And then there was a fourth amendment proposed by Councilmember Saka that would require mailed notice of area-wide rezones. So I will get back to the presentation. Okay. I knew somebody would ask that. I did prepare the answer. Okay. So this is where some of you will have seen all this before. So we're going to start with the proposed amendments to the text of the One Seattle Comprehensive Plan. So these are mostly policy amendments. Amendment number 2 was proposed by Councilmember Rink, and it would add a policy to the plan to support anti-displacement and equitable development pilots. Specifically, this amendment would support zoning pilot programs such as the Roots to Roofs pilot that Councilmember Rink has introduced recently to encourage development and partnership structures to mitigate displacement and promote equitable development. Amendment number 6 was introduced by Councilmember Strauss and would amend the plan to support multi-generational housing. Specifically, this amendment would encourage a range of housing types, sizes, and affordability levels that are appropriate for families with children and other multi-generational households. Amendment number 7 would amend the plan policies to remove parking requirements citywide, and that is an amendment by Councilmember Rink, and she also proposed a companion amendment that we will see later, and it's amendment number 84, and those two would need to be adopted together to remove parking requirements in the land use code. Amendment number 19 would amend the comprehensive plan to add a goal for multi-bedroom units. This is proposed by Councilmember Hollingsworth. And it would add a new policy to the housing element of the comprehensive plan, stating a goal of at least 25% of the city's new housing having 2 or more bedrooms. Still in the comprehensive plan, amendment number 3 by Councilmember Strauss would amend the plan's policies to allow taller buildings in neighborhood centers. Specifically, that amendment would allow 7 or 8-story buildings near major transit stops or near existing concentrations of goods and services. Amendment number 34 is by Councilmember Rink, and it would add 8 neighborhood centers to the comprehensive plan. Most of and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail later in the presentation. Most of these 8 neighborhood centers were included in the final environmental impact statement that was prepared for the One Seattle plan. However, additional environmental review to consider the proposed boundaries would be required for those new neighborhood centers. So those are the selected amendments to the comprehensive plan, the One Seattle plan text that we highlighted for your consideration. Of the 53, we just those ones were consistent with themes and topics that the commission has been on record supporting in the past. We have many more proposed amendments within the actual permanent legislation that I will go through, and I've categorized these so that actually central staff categorize them. But you will start to see some themes emerge as we go through these. And this is where you will also start to see a little bit of either duplication, maybe some contradiction or conflicts or overlap. And some of these are where most likely that these will be narrowed down. So just starting with amendment number 56. All 4 of these are actually by Councilmember Rink. 56 would exclude accessory dwelling units from floor area ratio limits. Number 57 would allow larger maximum size for ADUs. Specifically, it would increase the maximum size of ADUs with 3 or more bedrooms to 1,200 square feet from the current standard of 1,000 square feet. Number 58 would exclude ADUs from density calculations. This amendment would only count principal dwelling units towards the maximum density allowance, allowing ADUs to be built in addition to that maximum density on a lot. And then number 59 would exempt ADUs from mandatory housing affordability regulations. The next several are on affordable housing. Number 60, proposed by Council President Nelson, would expand the affordable housing bonus in neighborhood residential zones. It would expand alternative standards for development of low-income housing in neighborhood residential zones to remove the criteria for location within a frequent transit area, and would also include an increase in the maximum allowable floor area ratio from 1.8 to 2.0, and a stipulation for no minimum required parking. A similar amendment, number 61, would expand that affordable housing bonus and extend the bonus to social housing. So would expand the standards for low-income housing development to all lots in neighborhood residential zones, remove parking requirements, and extend those standards to social housing. Again, you'll see a little bit of similarity. Number 62 is by Councilmember Hollingsworth, extending the affordable housing bonus to social housing. This would include social housing in the alternative standards for development in neighborhood residential zones currently proposed for low-income housing. Number 63 would expand the affordable housing bonus FAR, floor area ratio, in low-rise zones, and that's Council President Nelson's amendment. That would provide bonus development standards of additional FAR and height for affordable housing in multifamily zones. And number 64 by Councilmember Strauss would expand the affordable housing bonus in multifamily zones that meet certain criteria. The next batch of amendments is on corner stores. And there are three that are all mostly similar, but I'll try to parse out the differences. Number 65, allowing stores to be located anywhere in neighborhood residential by Council President Nelson. That would remove the requirement that ground floor commercial uses in neighborhood residential zones be located on a corner lot. Number 66, would allow stores with a wider variety of commercial uses to be located on any lot in neighborhood residential zones with no size maximum. And then 67 by Councilmember Strauss is basically the same as 65. Okay. The next several are on density. Number 70, increasing FAR for densest development in stacked flats by Councilmember Kettle would increase the FAR to 1.6 for all developments and to 1.8 for stacked flats on larger lots within frequent transit service areas. Number 72 by Councilmember Rink would amend density development standards to allow portions of a lot with environmentally critical areas to count towards density calculations. Specifically, the amendment would delete references to riparian corridors, wetlands and their buffers, submerged lands and areas within the shoreline setback, and designated non-disturbance area in steep slopes from the lot area calculations. Number 74 by Council President Nelson would increase neighborhood residential and low-rise 1 height limits. So the amendment would increase the maximum structure height in those zones from 32 to 35 feet to allow for higher floor-to-floor ceiling heights and thicker plates between floors. Numbers 75 and 79 are both by Councilmember Hollingsworth. 75 would require indoor air quality and noise improvements for development near interstates, highways, major truck streets, or railroad rights of way. So specifically, that amendment would add a requirement that housing, schools, and childcare centers near highways and in the industrial zones would include HVAC systems to improve indoor air quality and sound insulating windows to reduce exterior noise. 79 proposes a bonus for accessible units and would incentivize construction of type A accessible units in neighborhood residential zones by allowing the square footage of type A accessible units to be exempt from floor area ratio limits, maximum density, and lot coverage limitations. Okay, the next several are on parking, and there are some similarities here also. 84 by Councilmember Rink would remove off-street parking requirements citywide. So this is the one that I mentioned. It would be paired with the comp plan amendment to the actual plan policy that would amend the land use code to remove parking requirements citywide for all land uses in all zones. Number 85 was also proposed by Councilmember Rink, and it would amend parking requirements to implement the state law. And there's a new state law, 2025 Senate Bill 5184. So this would reduce or eliminate parking requirements for a range of uses to implement that law, which must be in effect by 2027. So basically moving it up before January 2027. 86 is by Council President Nelson and would remove the parking regulations within frequent transit service areas. Oh, and specifically removing those regulations from areas outside of regional or urban centers. Okay, there are several unstacked flats. As I mentioned earlier, number 88 was withdrawn by Councilmember Hollingsworth. That was amendment on expanding the stack flat bonus that would lower the minimum lot size to 5,000 square feet to utilize the bonus FAR. Number 89, by Council President Nelson, would remove the lot size standards for stack flat bonuses, increase the FAR from 1.4 to 1.6, increase the allowed density from 1 unit per 650 square feet to 1 unit per 600 square feet, and increase the allowed lot coverage from 50% to 55%. Council Member Kettle's version, number 90, would remove lot size and transit proximity provisions, increase the FAR from 1.4 to 1.6, and increase the allowed lot coverage from 50% to 60%. And then this is the last one that I presented last week. Number 96 is on flexible side setbacks from Council Member Kettle, and it would allow flexible average 5-foot side setbacks in neighborhood residential zones, and the minimum dimension of an average side setback would be 3 feet. I'm just going to pause for a second. We do want to just keep moving through.
And then we'll circle back.
The new amendments. Oh, there are 3 new amendments I want to cover. Okay, there were, like I mentioned, there were 3 new amendments that were added last Friday, all 3 by Councilmember Hollingsworth. Number 107 would allow larger maximum size for ADUs for legacy homeowners, specifically increasing the maximum size of ADUs to 1,500 square feet for legacy homeowners in low-rise zones near transit rather than the current 1,000 square feet. Number 108 would exempt ADUs from FAR calculations in low-rise zones for legacy homeowners, specifically allowing ADUs in low-rise zones to be exempted from FAR calculations for properties owned by legacy homeowners in frequent transit areas. And then number 109 is related to reduce setbacks in low-rise zones for legacy homeowners. It would reduce rear and side setbacks on lots near transit in low-rise zones for legacy homeowners. Okay. We didn't get into centers last week, so because that was a lot. We did cover the policy amendments to the comprehensive plan and the amendments to the text of the legislation. We decided centers was another topic that would require more time, so we saved it for today. So we're going to keep this at a really high level, but I wanted to give you a sense of what's happening within the amendments related to centers. So overall, 10 new neighborhood centers have been proposed in the amendments. 9 of these were studied in the draft EIS, but without any boundaries or zoning. They were basically identified as bubbles on a map. So the amendments do state clearly that additional environmental review to consider the proposed boundaries of these centers will be required prior to final council action. 8 of these were required by Councilmember Rink, Alki, Broadview, Dawson, Gasworks, Loyal Heights. She proposed one of these, Nickerson South Canal or North Queen Anne Nickerson. I can't remember which one, but Councilmember Kettle proposed a similar neighborhood center, and they had in the same area, but they had different names and different sizes. Roanoke Park and South Wedgewood. Councilmember Strauss identified East Ballard, which had previously been identified in the DEIS as West Finney Ridge. And then Councilmember Strauss also proposed a new Magnolia neighborhood center that is a large neighborhood center that would replace 2 smaller neighborhood centers called Magnolia Village and North Magnolia. So those are the new neighborhood centers that were proposed. There were also revisions to 14 previously proposed neighborhood centers and urban centers. Endeline in West Seattle was renamed Fauntleroy. High Point and Morgan Junction in West Seattle, Madrona, Bryant, Ravenna, Wedgwood. There should be a bullet here on Magnolia Village and North Magnolia, Finney Ridge, Tangletown, Upper Fremont, West Green Lake, and Queen Anne. So those are the revisions to neighborhood centers and urban centers. And to complicate it even more, so Councilmember Strauss has provided at this point 3 options for each of the following neighborhood centers with maps: East Ballard, Magnolia, Magnolia Village, North Magnolia, Finney Ridge, Tangletown, Upper Fremont, and West Green Lake. So there are 3 versions of each of those with maps that all look different from each other. He has extended a survey out and is encouraging his constituents to chime in and provide input on which of those 3 that should move forward. And there is also clearly stated that additional environmental review of these changes would be required prior to final council action. I think that's all we have on centers. So we just want to keep that at a high level for now. And you've heard a lot from me. So now it's your turn to talk. Or so we can have clarifying questions, but we would also really like to generate comments and discussion. Because we will be drafting a letter very soon.
So everyone, hop in the queue, get your name in the chat, and we'll just go one by one. Michaela was fast, ready to chime in immediately. So lead us off.
I just have a question. I'm not starting out the gate with a big soliloquy.
What?
Okay. I've done that in the past few meetings on this already, so my opinions are on the record. Going back to the ones where there were revisions to neighborhood centers, did you quantify which of these are expansions and contractions, or kind of a no net change because they're just moving things around?
We did. And I can, for the sake of all commissioners, I can resend, so it's higher up in your inbox, but I sent on Saturday a mammoth email with 4 attachments, one of which was an Excel spreadsheet that went through each of the neighborhood centers. So I'm just going to resend that right now, so you all have it again at the top of your email.
Broadly speaking, though, what's your take?
So broadly,
Yeah.
so on this slide, you'll see there are 10 new neighborhood centers proposed. So that's obviously a net gain.
Net gain, but the one where they're making revisions. Yeah.
So some of these did have reductions. And then, but for the most part, all of these that had the 3 options, they were all gains. So,
okay.
For the most part, I don't want to get into the details of each one, but on this slide, several included reductions, but then
I got the spreadsheet open.
but then all of these ones were net gains. So overall, if I think even without the new ones, it is a net gain.
Okay.
I do think it might be worth just noting that if everything was passed as proposed, which is probably unlikely, there would be, in my mind, an imbalance of how neighborhood centers were placed throughout the city, because there are some areas that have more losses happening through the proposals and some that have. So looking broadly across the city, it could be an interesting uneven application of the sizes if everything were to pass.
Thank you.
I would also add, this is a great example of why until we, the law department, and everybody else sees the final amendment package, it'll be really difficult to quantify the magnitude of loss or gain. As some of these might fall to the side. And then I would also add, and I know I'm jumping the queue here, that right now, we anticipate a supplemental EIS being prepared next year for the regional centers, as there's going to be a proposal for additional density in regional and urban centers. And there's the possibility, if there are proposed neighborhood centers during this round of amendments that do not move forward, there's the possibility they could be reintroduced next year as part of next year's annual amendment and potentially addressed in one supplemental EIS.
And when is the scoping for that supplemental EIS?
I do not know. I don't think that has been set yet.
We should engage in that
Yes.
scoping and provide comment.
Indeed.
Great opportunity for us to advance the neighborhood vision conversation.
Dylan.
Thank you, John, for the presentation and distilling. It was a huge amount of information into like more manageable bite-sized chunks. I'm trying to get my head around how to comment on the neighborhood centers without getting into the nitty-gritty, as I know we're trying to avoid. But there's some big issues. Some of the proposed changes coming from Maritza Rivera and from Rapsaka. There's issue, and also Strauss's revision to Finney, which he has 3 proposed options, but one of them really narrows the scope of where residential housing can be built. I'm just wondering if I can just share my screen to show one example, just to kind of hopefully spur a conversation about how we comment in general on some of these reductions. Am I able to share my screen? Does that work?
I think to be able to. Should be.
Yeah.
You guys see this?
We see you.
Now we
Yeah,
do.
now we do.
Is it going in there? Okay.
Yep.
So there's a red circle, a red kind of boundary, and there's blue in the middle. This is what Maritza Rivera is proposing to do to the Wedgwood neighborhood center. What you see in red are the largely residential blocks that have traditionally been single family. But this is also where we have the greatest opportunity to add density. What she is currently outlining is the core, the kind of commercial core of this neighborhood center with some adjacent parcels that would provide some additional density. But what we're seeing with this is this is not the intent of our neighborhood centers, of introducing the idea of a neighborhood center, which is to bring people, to bring housing to existing commercial centers throughout Seattle. She's basically creating a boundary around the existing commercial center and limiting it at that. That is just, it's wrong. And it takes away from the reason why we're doing these neighborhood centers in the first place. And so I want to find a way to highlight that and put that into words, because it applies to Rob Saka's amendment to Fauntleroy, which has already been reduced based off of Harold's reducing of these neighborhood centers back in June. And we're just seeing these things get chopped and chopped and chopped so that all we're going to have left in a couple of these is a commercial core. And so I'd like to find a way just to kind of make that point so we can point out the intent or remind council of the intent of these neighborhood centers is not just to identify where we have commercial cores, but it's to identify where we have commercial cores and then provide a radius around those cores where we can add residential density, with the intent being that we largely maintain the commercial core as it is, maintain those existing services, those existing small businesses. We don't want to develop those and have those be displaced. We'd rather bring residents, bring housing units to that commercial activity, which requires that we develop on lots that have traditionally been for single family housing. So I just want to make that point that several of these reductions, typically these reductions look like this. They're chopping off the highest opportunity zones for where we're going to see residential 5-story apartments go in and really bring added density while still maintaining the commercial core. If we focus our revisions on just the commercial core, we're going to see displacement of these existing small businesses that are creating our neighborhood centers in the first place. So I'll leave it at that. I know I'm getting into the weeds, and I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Dylan. Who else has comments here? CEO.
Yeah, I think in our original round of comments on the draft plan, we had asked the question of like, what is the purpose of neighborhood centers? Is it just to sort of like codify what's already happening, or is it to set groundwork for like a future state of these places? And I think that's the distinction that you're getting at, Dylan, is the revisions that are happening are basically just setting the zoning to match what's already existing, moving it out of pure residential and into this more like historical mixed use. But none of that sets up any of those places for like long-term success, either for like the businesses that are there or the people that might live there or like the city writ large. And so I think that framing of like doing more than just making the maps correct is like what the city should be trying to do, and like what we should be pushing for with the neighborhood centers. And I know like we heard from OPCD that there isn't necessarily a vision or plan for neighborhood centers becoming urban centers, becoming regional centers, but I think that's something that the commission has had eyes on. And so thinking about that, like future, what is the future of this place, not just sort of its historic present.
I kind of think that conversation was about corner stores. I remember Dylan asking that question in the context of what is the point of these corner stores? You're trying to seed future neighborhood centers.
Yeah.
But there could have been a similar conversation.
Like what's the seed supposed to be for the growth of each of these ongoing things?
Yeah.
Like historically it probably was like someone did a corner store in a neighborhood and then somebody built a thing across the street and now you have Fauntleroy. Now you have But I also think Saka's reductions and then only adding High Point area is problematic to me as a District 2 resident, but I can only speak for the eyes that I have on like my District 1, sorry, as a District 1 resident. But I don't know if other folks also have opinions to that extent in other districts. But High Point is unique to the other proposed centers in its community.
Vanessa, you wanted to weigh in?
I'm going to defer to Dylan, who has a quick response, and then after Rebecca, I can hop in. Did you have your
I think in what you're getting at, Zio, the true vision of kind of these neighborhood centers and the corner stores as well. and what we did not hear from OPCD that I think should be part of this plan is, I'm apprehensive to use the words 15-minute city, but it gets at what we're talking about, is to these neighborhood centers, they're the start of providing this sort of access to goods and services across Seattle without the need to own an automobile. And this is a start, and it needs to continue. And there should be a vision to expand that across the city. And part of it is corner stores and allowing those to crop up where they make sense and start to grow into maybe a future neighborhood center, and to allow neighborhood centers to potentially grow maybe to urban centers. But I think it's more just wanting to ensure there is a vision for allowing residents access to these goods and services without the need for a car, and that it's an overall city vision. And so I think we've made that point in our letters in the past. I think we just need to make sure that point again.
Can I respond to that? Sure. And I also think there's this more recent comment that has come up in some of our meetings about the small businesses too that are operating in these areas need a customer base. And so this concept of neighborhood centers also supports a healthy, thriving retail business culture throughout the city, so that we don't have as much segregation of uses. And we, yes. Go ahead. I'm done.
Okay. Rebecca.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that and kind of tie it back to what Olivia said earlier about, these various reductions or growths of neighborhood centers across the city, and it being kind of like a weird geographic equity issue also, or like some of it's a function of our newish district approach to city council, but seeing a lot of the reductions being in District 4 and District 1 rather than District 6, and seeing how those are kind of distributed across the city, and then pairing that with a framing of like, this is really about creating opportunity for businesses and residents. Like, again, this, like, I don't remember who said it, maybe it was Dylan, but this is the starting point for these kinds of developments to happen. And we should be offering the opportunity across the city for those, opportunities to flourish, and rather than being in kind of a defensive crouch for, protecting whatever they're trying to protect. But I think that pointing out that if all of these were adopted writ large, it would result in a very unequal distribution of where those opportunities are located and who has access to them, both for starting or maintaining a business, finding a place to live, access to transit, etc.
I wanted just to piggyback on some of these comments and link it to what Michaela was talking about earlier with regards to providing enough affordable housing. I believe that the neighborhood centers are really where the sort of frontier of new affordable housing is going to be built and distributed throughout Seattle, because the zoning is such that it can potentially support buildings of the scale that are viable for nonprofit affordable housing developers. So amendments such as Strauss's adding, going up to 6 stories, a lot of the stacked flat bonuses, the affordable housing bonuses, the alignment, the amendments that create alignment with the social housing developer. I think those are all important to wrap up into this bundle of, not only are these neighborhood centers places that are going to support new economic activity, they're also the places that are going to support our additional capacity for affordable housing. The other thing, and then I wanted to also say that I wanted to highlight, is with regards to Rebecca's point about the inequity. I think it's really interesting that Hollingsworth's late breaking amendments, they all kind of apply to low-rise zones, which is basically a lot of the neighborhoods that have been gentrified. They are they've already been upzoned. They're already low rise. They're not subject to most of the changes to HB 1110. And so it's all the more important to provide this extra development capacity to legacy homeowners, especially in these LR zones, because it creates an avenue for some of those homeowners to leverage their land in a way that we've not allowed in the past. And so I wanted to highlight that as well. Michaela.
I kind of looked at this and I was like, why don't we just allow this for all the property owners in those zones? That was kind of my reaction, is like, why don't we have reduced setbacks for everybody? So that more people could benefit from these eased requirements. Am I missing something here?
No, you're preaching
Is
to
there
this
like-
particular choir.
Okay. It just seems oddly restrictive. I don't think that it would undermine like the competitiveness of a legacy homeowner's ability to build a project and make money on their project if their neighbors could do it as well. I think it's just in the spirit of removing barriers and making it more possible for more units to get built. Vanessa, do you have an answer to that?
Do you have a definition for legacy?
Yeah, particularly with
It's 20 years. They have to have owned the property for 20 years.
This is just an assumption, my assumption, not
Yeah.
I wonder if these later amendments that were added on August 8th, the component of legacy homeowners, I wonder if that was anticipatory of Councilmember Hollingsworth making these amendments more palatable to some of her colleagues by not making it across the board, by saying it would only apply to legacy homeowners. And I could be completely wrong, but I wonder if this is sort of starting the negotiation by like, okay, I'm not going to get support to do it across the board, so I'm going to propose something that might be more palatable.
But only palatable for people who were in the city 20 years ago, who had the means to buy a house at that time. Right? Like, who are we advantaging in this policy proposal here? And why?
I think it's very specific to Councilmember Hollingsworth's district. She's talked a lot about wanting to make sure people can stay in their homes and not have parts of her district further gentrified. I'm not defending them. I'm just
Okay.
trying to channel where I think
Thank you.
she might be coming from based on comments I've heard from her on the dais.
I would say that, yeah, my lens is that this creates the opportunity for partnerships between homeowners and developers by making backyards more desirable, because you can do a larger project that is more likely to be viable and maintain the legacy home ownership. So I feel like it's a way um, to give legacy homeowners who probably don't have for the most part, don't have the capital or resources or expertise to do this sort of development, like an extra incentive, and it creates an opportunity for the land that they own to become equity that they can leverage.
But if the goal is if it's an anti-displacement goal, don't homeowners who didn't buy a house 20 years ago also deserve the right to be able to like exercise this? Anyway.
I think you have to draw the line somewhere, because I think politically people would be like, well, what about the developer who bought the house, a month ago? There has to be a line somewhere if you're trying to create this preference.
The one thing I see on the legacy homeowners, it means on any given block, you have some legacy and some non-legacy. You end up with very uneven rules affecting neighbors. That doesn't seem real smooth.
Seems like an oddly limiting restriction for development potential. If the goal is to help lots of different people stay in Seattle and create housing options while they do that. I don't know. I'd probably need to see the proposal in more detail to really understand this, but
We can send the revised. I'm not gonna send the whole 434, which is probably now 450, but we'll send that language.
and
out.
is it like informed by some sort of community initiative or like engagement that has happened? And
Doubt that will be in the.
is there an analysis that says like, anyway?
It would
Yeah.
affect-
Yeah. Let's see. Andy?
No, or a comment, just it seems to give unequal things on a given street, when some homeowners can do something and their neighbor can't.
Okay. Who else would like to weigh in? Are we just kind of like mostly focused on neighborhood centers, or do we want to talk about some of the other amendments? No. Deanna, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I have one question and then offer a very brief comment. My question is, given what this would mean with regards to having additional environmental clearance, if there was support to increase the number of neighborhood centers, right, and that in itself would require for it to go through its due environmental process, what would that mean for the adoption of the plan?
Yeah. So the select committee will vote on the amendments, however they shake out by the 17th, 18th, and 19th of September. And at that point, the law department will determine or will offer advice on whether a supplemental EIS is required or whether an environmental addendum is required. An environmental addendum, an addendum to the EIS is not appealable. A supplemental EIS is appealable, and the supplemental if a supplemental EIS is required, it would very likely not allow the plan to be adopted until next year. And as I said earlier, because we don't have the information at our fingertips to say definitely a supplemental is going to be needed, definitely only an addendum. John, do you happen to have it at your fingertips? I'm sorry, the language you and I talked about on Monday, potentially around the environmental review. I might be able to.
Yes.
We crafted something that kind of tried to thread the needle.
For the letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the commission supports adoption of the plan this year and supports entertaining amendments that would require additional environmental review during the 2026 comp plan amendment process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That is just what John and I came up with. So, and that will be when John drafts the letter and sends it out to you all, you can all determine if that is where you want to land. It was an attempt to, as I said, to thread the needle of not holding up the plan, get the plan adopted, and also keep the door open for additional neighborhood centers, not 10 years from now when the next major update to the plan is, but actually next year during the amendment cycle.
Right. Tentatively, I like that. And then my quick comment, I'm excited to see so many proposed amendments, in support of our, of not having mandatory off-street parking requirements. What I do think would be great if any of these go forward is I don't see anything about parking maximums. And although we, tend to like to have the language about let the market decide that, I do think we need to have maximums. And I'll just share Mexico City's experience where, without further analysis, to be honest, and it's worked out so far for over 10 years now, is to turn the parking minimums into the maximums. And but something that could be analyzed and considered, just because there would be certain land uses where no requirements may become way more than we need for certain land uses. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. That's something that as a commission we could consider and discuss, as well as I just know from experience that by 100%, let's remove parking requirements. That doesn't mean we shouldn't regulate on-street parking. And on-street, the tension for the right of way that is going to create when, and hopefully we see all this development come up. I mean, that would be such a great tension to have, right? Once we do see all this new development come up in Seattle, the tension is going to then pivot to a lot of demand of our public right of way for on-street parking, and it will eventually, and our job is to think about the problems, decades from today, is that at that time, it will become increasingly more challenging if we're not fast enough in implementing our complete streets network to make space for bikes, buses, and sidewalk expansions. So I think making sure we're releasing, the requirement, from having that be the hidden cost for housing. We also should be thinking ahead to make sure it doesn't become politically inviable in the future to add, basically active transportation and transit facilities to our public right-of-ways because of the pressure of on-street parking if unregulated.
Can I add a comment?
Thank you.
On parking?
Yeah.
And that is support removing minimum parking. It's kind of catching up with what other cities have done. We have a lot of information on that. And I think we did have in one of our prior levels that the commission, the board's getting rid of minimum parking. Maximum parking, I think, is an important issue. I guess I would separate it so it doesn't get bogged down in trying to get rid of minimum parking, but I think that could be done as a separate set of discussions and recommendations, because I don't think there's anything on maximum parking in here, but I think there is a place for a discussion of it, so I'd like to keep them separate.
There is one amendment that mentions maximum parking requirements, and I'm trying to.
It's number 8. It's in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to share it.
Oh, great.
If I can. I might have to share.
But it does have
different
screen supporting this, and that we've said it previously, and the council people support it.
Sure, I have it. Okay. Yeah. Amendment number 8 was introduced by Councilmember Strauss, and it would apply maximum parking limits in regional centers. And the details are, it would apply maximum parking limits in regional centers with light rail. Currently, the city uses maximum parking requirements in downtown Seattle, South Lake Union, Uptown, and the U District. So it would expand maximum parking limits to areas, to other regional centers with light rail. Specifically, you could think Northgate.
Does it include planned light rail?
Good question.
And it should include high passing frequent transit too, like where there are lots of buses.
This is just the way it's drafted right now.
Yeah.
And it's the only one.
Are you comfortable keeping maximum and minimum as separate and then in separate discussions, or do they need to be in?
I kind of think they have to be part of the same concept, like, right? Like if we're going to move in a different direction, we need to have a smart and thoughtful parking strategy that, and if we don't do it now, it won't happen. And so,
I
and
wouldn't want to lose the getting at a minimum because maximum and hang it up. I guess that's what I'm thinking.
I don't think maximum's gonna hang it up. I think getting rid of parking at all is what's gonna hang it up. I think parking is a very emotional thing in communities. There's almost nothing that lights up a neighborhood more than their parking. And so it's a real struggle when it comes down to making those votes and people fearing that they might not be able to park right in front of their home. And so I think countering that with a thoughtful strategy around making sure that we don't have, massive parking garages and that we have streets that are wonderful places to like walk and wait for a bus, is part of that narrative of like, if you change the conditions, you also have to make those conditions something that push people towards other options and make those options pleasant for them and kind of not like without a second thought, of course I'll walk there. Like that's part of how you achieve a city that has fewer cars that need places to be stored. But that has to happen over time. And I like the idea of looking to other major cities, like Mexico City in terms of best practices. I really do think Seattle should be leading the way on this and should not be following other cities. We are a big city. And with that should come the best and most thoughtful parking elimination strategy that there is.
And Sightline has a whole report on parking minimums in the state of Washington. So we have, nearby comparisons.
And I do know, Deanna, that some of your comments that you've made its way into our former letters. Right? Like you were like, we need a comprehensive parking demand management plan. Is that what you would have called it?
Well, it's travel demand management strategy, which the problem with those strategies is they require more than just parking, right? It's parking, road usage charge. It could be all kind, a lot of other incentives, but there should be, I would wish that our, transportation plan, that there was money for a very specific and intentional travel demand management study to inform all the plans and implementations and the phases for it, right? So as an example, in our Seattle of the future, we probably want to see everywhere, every single neighborhood center should have parking meters, every single one. Do we want those day one that they were announcing neighborhood centers? No, it's when the demand merits it, right? And so to me, it's like, if we don't study this and don't understand and establish these thresholds of when there could be a pipeline for making sure we're regulating on-street parking, right? As an example of one of the measures for travel demand management, it's kind of, we're going to be doomed to create, livability and using our streets to be kind of a nightmare by saturating development. And that's only because the other part of the coin, the other side of the coin of adding housing is managing demand of travel, right? It's both and. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I want to jump in and remind people to use the queue as we go along. So I'm going to just jump back. Let's see. Dylan, I believe you were in the queue. I don't know if it's this discussion is past you,
super quick. The discussion did kind of pass, but just quick. I think Olivia put some detail in there just regarding Hollingsworth's amendment and legacy. 20-year legacy homeowners. I mean, I think it's directly related to the loss of African American residents in the Central District from 80% back in the 80s and the 90s to 14% today. So I think that's the idea behind the legacy component of that. And it makes me kind of weary of commenting on it in a negative light, because I understand that sort of displacement concern, even though it'd also be great to open that up to anybody and everybody. I get it from a displacement point of view. So that's all I have.
Okay, Michaela?
Oh, no, that, I'm done. That was
Okay.
about,
Okay. Rebecca?
My point's been made.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Oh, Vanessa, has your point been made?
Not yet.
Okay.
Just something I forgot to mention at the very beginning when we were talking about the strategy and the structure of the letter. And we touched on this on Thursday at Housing and Neighborhoods, but our staff's thought right now in terms of composing the letter is not to go through amendment by amendment as is in the presentation, but rather to lead with the topics. So regarding stack flats, we're on record for saying we support making them happen as much as possible and amendments that forward those. Regarding parking, we agree with eliminating minimum parking, and you could say support expanding the areas where maximum parking currently is required, or where there is a parking maximum and include future light rail as well as existing light rail. So we talked on Thursday about not being specific to the amendments for a number of reasons, one of which is because the package that is entertained by council will have different numbers, and some of these will collapse into each other. So we've referenced them here for all of your reference, but staff is recommending in the letter we not actually note the specific numbers, because those numbers might reference different amendments by the time the package is made.
Right.
What is useful to council when they receive it? Will they want to know which amendment you're talking about, or are they okay with it for general?
Given the fact that I think there are going to be a number of different iterations that are shared just amongst council members, I think referencing a number is not going to be very helpful. And I think looking at our the broad audience beyond council, that's one of the reasons we want to approve the letter a week before the public hearing, is so that people can hopefully reference the commission's letter and say, just like the planning commission says, we are in favor of amendments that remove the minimum parking requirements. We are in favor of, and have it be topical.
I'm just going to use my prerogative to jump in here. I think it's really important that we, for all the conversations that we've had, that we are bold in terms of being explicit about removing off-street parking requirements. And it's just if we want to really get the public's attention, and we want this particular measure to carry some weight, I think we have to be strong about this. There's going to be tons of nuance and discussion and discussion about the implementation, but I think we can clearly state that we should remove off-street parking requirements and have that be an easy talking point that really does encapsulate a lot of the thinking of the commission over the past years. I got to jump out for just a second. If somebody else can take over the emceeing of the comments, I'll be right back.
I can run the queue. Rebecca.
Yeah, I agree with that we should make that ask really specifically. And I don't know if in the past or if in this letter, we include a lot of rationale, but I do think it's important to be there's so much evidence supporting the removal of parking minimums. There's so much consensus that the market should decide, at least in some areas where there are no maximums. And again, pairing it with, these other points that we've made around, we are just trying to use the regulatory lever the city actually has to encourage the kind of growth that we want to see. This is an integral part of it. It's not just a values statement of people. I mean, and I think we all agree that we should be getting people out of cars, right? But it's about that, but it's also about, pairing it with these various other amendments and policies that we agree with, so that the city can grow thoughtfully in this way and press and pull the levers that we have available to us rather than, you know, pie in the sky policy ideas that will never come to fruition. Like this is a very, you know, well-studied and well-understood policy tool that the city should be using, says everybody.
Dylan, I'm assuming your comment is related. Mine's kind of a tangent. So do you want to go first? I was just gonna ask, I haven't read through all of the like full 400-page document.
Really?
I'm working through it. But I think Amendment 76 isn't in our short list. And it's from Councilmember Rink, and it's around amending the definition of major transit service to include frequent transit service. And I think it's like kind of the counterbalance maybe to some of this parking that picks up conversation, because it expands the network that would be included in the definition. And so I wonder if we want to add that to our list and not reference it directly, but talk about expanding opportunities in proximity to like all the transit that makes the city accessible to all sorts of people.
Yes.
What are the policy, what are the policy implications of that aside from parking?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you like look through the little like track changes piece of code, and it literally just changes like a couple of words from frequent to major, and but it seems like it impacts FAR in areas. I don't know, but I wonder about how it impacts the like upzoning along transit corridors piece. It feels like it could be really impactful, and might be flying under our radar right now.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Dylan?
Yeah, just trying to put into words, as normal, I'm stuck on neighborhood centers, but I think maybe something to the extent of neighborhood centers should maximize the amount of residential building construction over 5 stories within a quarter mile of the central node of the neighborhood center. And maybe just be able to leave it at that. And that would cover a lot of the reductions, would make our point on a lot of the reductions that are being proposed in some of these neighborhood centers. So it's something for us to think about as we get our letter together.
Michaela?
Does a quarter mile limit some of the proposed expansions?
Have to look into that. That's my, I guess I wanted to say maximize the amount of residential building construction over 5 stories near the neighborhood center, but I felt like we needed to give some sort of boundary on it.
Right, if you don't make it measurable and specific, then.
Right,
and
a quarter mile is what they used before.
Quarter mile sounds small.
That's as far as a lot of people are willing to walk.
I think a quarter mile might be consistent with the definition of neighborhood centers that was put into the language of the growth strategy.
Got it.
I do think there are some amendments that go beyond that, particularly some of the proposals from Councilmember Strauss. So it will be interesting to see if those get passed, if they also make changes to the language in the growth strategy around neighborhood centers, because it would require flexibility of those standards to go beyond.
You know, maybe it is fit a quarter mile of the central node or nodes, plural, because he's proposing Magnolia combined neighborhood centers, which would basically be like a mile long. And it could be valid because there are multiple nodes there. So I think we might just say we could say the central nodes, plural. But yeah, something for us to kind of chew on. I just really think we need to make a point that Maritza Rivera and also Saka's proposal to crop into line just really kneecap the ability for those to become anything other than just what they already are, a small little commercial course. I'm trying to think through language for that.
Matt's back.
I'm back. Where are we? Is that Dylan or is it Michaela? Who's next on the list?
Deanna, I think, is next.
No,
and
it was
then-
Michaela, I think.
No, I think you made your.
I have nothing to say.
Oh, Michaela.
I doubt
Michaela,
that.
So is it my turn?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to, so just, I think, see what you mentioned about, even if we don't reference 76, I think I just want to mention for the record, for staff, for the letter, I also think we should encourage language around what is being proposed in this amendment 76, generally speaking. Second, I think what Dylan is mentioning, the whole like nodes, kind of language might be a good addition. Also, we haven't mentioned anything around the cornerstones, but I like 65 about not limiting to a corner of the cornerstone. So yay for that. So I'd like to see if the commission generally also agrees with cornerstones not being corner stores. Sorry. So wanted to just mention that sounded like a good revision. And also 79 about the bonus for accessible units. That's more of a question. And perhaps, I don't know, Matt or others that are knowledgeable about it, what your thoughts are on said amendment about if you provide accessible units, you get a bonus. I just don't know what the implications for that would be. So before expressing support for it, I would like to better understand what that would mean.
Yeah, well, I was just about to talk about that. I think it's quite powerful. I mean, they're essentially, when you're building, multifamily, you're right up against your FAR limit, and if Type A fully accessible units are excluded from that, it means they're essentially free, and so it means we'll get well beyond the minimum accessible units. So I think it's a really positive wrinkle. I would love to reinforce it.
Same, super reinforce it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, and just stepping out just a little bit, the current of a lot of the amendments, which I'm really heartened by, is the fact that these are all carrots for the most part, that there are a lot of incentives, a lot of bonuses, a lot of the amendments just seek to motivate development in the way that we want to see development move, as opposed to kind of punitive poison pills. And I'd love to highlight that as part of the letter, in that, yes, there are a lot of amendments, but the goal of a lot of these amendments is to create avenues for the right kind of development. And it would just be, I think, I was really, at first when I saw 106, 108 amendments, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible, death by 1,000 cuts. But then parsing them, really, you're like, oh, well, this creates, I see where this creates an opportunity for this, for this kind of development, or this niche, or this property owner, and granted, it's probably adds lots and lots of complexity and nuance to the land use code, but I'm glad that it's more about incentives and less about restrictions. Let's see, Michaela.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I said that last week and I think I shocked people because I think people were really like coming into it thinking, here's a bunch of council members who are trying to nibble away and degrade the quality and the impact of the plan. And I did caveat my statement though, in that staff has selected what we're talking about today on the basis of amendments that relate to things that the commission has weighed in on. And so just letting you know that we're seeing a curated selection, and of the topics that matter to us a lot, I think in setting aside some of the neighborhood centers, which are clearly protectionist and responding to a certain constituency, there's a lot of good in here, and elected officials do need to hear that. They do need to be like lifted up for when they're trying to kind of maximize it. But they should also be called out for bad governance, for doing a lot of this behind closed doors, for us having all of this conversation around process and not knowing, like, what is it that we are actually going to be voting on? And how do we actually provide feedback on this when we don't know what the amendment is actually going to be? And then, dropping this right before they go on recess and then scheduling a vote basically right before an election. And kind of rushing a process that the city is taking its damn time on. All at the end here to get to a decision before there's a different council in place. And so kudos to the council members who are showing some leadership, but also shame on them for the bad governance component of this. So what's the good and the bad kind of like analysis of the stuff that we're not talking about today?
What we talked about last week, when we were trying to wrap our brains around this, was being strategic in this first letter and understanding that this is not going to be our only opportunity. We also talked about the idea of a lessons learned document that we would release after the plan is adopted by the select committee, not necessarily the full council, depending on the environmental review needed. And that the lessons learned document might be the place to really note, to have some of the more constructive criticism around the 11th hour proposals, 11th hour amendments,
don't need to learn those lists.
All that good stuff. And we did, and this is for the full commission to decide, but we talked about how to be most meaningful in this comment letter that's going to be coming out a week before the public hearing, and thinking that we're going to get the most traction by showing what we support as opposed to what we don't support.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder.
But that, again, that's just, it really is up to this body to decide what you want to put in that letter, and keeping in mind that this won't be the only opportunity.
Yes, what I just said does not need to end up in the letter, other than the encouragement and support for seeing them trying to make the plan yield the outcomes that are stated in the vision of the plan.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that we created space for commissioners who haven't spoken yet. If there's anyone, make sure that you add your name to the queue. We still have some time. And while you're coming up with your comments, let's go to Deanna. Oh no, Rebecca, and then do we skip Rebecca? I'm sorry, I'm still a little out of sync.
I think we're the queue is Rebecca, then Deanna.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of what Michaela said, I wanted to also say. I feel like as new gal in town, I don't know. It feels like that's a good approach, like the leading with the positive, and like kudos council member, good job for coming back with a lot more flexibility and generally a more expansive understanding and approach to the comp plan. Good job. It is hard for me to take all of that in good faith because of the process stuff, and it does not appear that they have been particularly interested in engaging with the commission, from what I can tell, over this process and with previous letters. And so personally, I wouldn't have a huge problem with being like, also, this is, you're putting everyone in a weird spot here where we're having to respond super quickly and digest this really, really fast. And you clearly don't have all of your stuff together, considering the fact that there's so much overlap and redundancy and things that cancel each other out. So less of a good job there. And I still worry about, some of the tree protection stuff in there could really blow a lot of stuff up, specifically the SDCI one, which I still think is bananas that, and I think it's been called out by other people as well. And I'm not advocating particularly for us to go full negative, but I do think like having that piece about process, which I think is maybe in one of our bullet points, is relevant. It's very relevant in the way of, if we're not able to really keep up and have, we have dedicated time as a body to, and we have staff who are digesting this for us and giving us, summaries, and the public doesn't get that. They have much less time. There are some constituents that are clearly represented in these amendments over others, and that's politics. That's the sausage making of policy. But there's something funky in there that I don't personally have a problem in calling out.
Thank you. Deanna.
Very briefly, I think similar sentiment, but more, I do think, let's just say 90% of the letter should be kudos, maybe 5% process, but I still want to make a strong point about what we led with Dylan's screen sharing, which is that is a definite no, right? And so that definite no should be stated. And so that's all I wanted to state for the record.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So I'm gonna let's see. I think I don't want us to just be spinning our wheels, but I definitely want to have everyone have a chance to get their comments in. But if let's see. So we will keep the floor open, keep the queue open. Caleb. All right. Wait, Caleb's typing. New commenter.
I'm gonna disappoint you. I was just gonna say Dylan G said what I wanted to say about the legacy homeowners when I was looking into that, and then he beat me to it. But I just want to second that.
Great. Let's see. Yeah. So we can finish early if we if we're just kind of covering the same ground. But I see Nick is now been inspired. Dylan, here, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, we were just kind of chatting on this, keeping the letter positive, and Matt, you pointed to these bless whoever that was. The idea of the poison pills. I mean, some of these, limited requiring certain citing requirements, and having that built into our land use code, like it's a bad idea. And I don't think it would get passed, but it might make sense for us just to mention it. And also, I mean, the other point about SDCI being able to require different site plans based off of trees being removed. They're pretty extreme, and maybe they're not even worth commenting on because we have so little faith they'll actually go through, and maybe that's fine. But they are really bad policy. Do we want to comment on that, or do we feel like those are so kind of unlikely to pass that it's just let's keep our letter focused on areas that we think will have an influence and will influence amendments that are more likely to pass? Is that kind of what folks are thinking in general?
I personally wouldn't mind highlighting 102, which is the SDCI gets discretionary site design based on tree location clause or amendment. That one seems like I don't want to risk that people don't understand the issue at heart there. It's probably not the planning commission's purview, but it is something that has to do with well, I think there's going to be plenty of folks on either side of that particular amendment. So my inclination is to highlight it. However, if it's the only one out of 108 that we pick on, it seems asymmetrical. I don't know what other people think. Nick, you had some comments?
Sorry, did Vanessa want to jump in on Dylan's or not?
I'll disagree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. One thought, and we as staff can work on this and throw something back out to you and you all can decide if that works. One thought I just had as you were talking, Dylan, and both you and Matt, about kind of the poison pill amendments, that could be couched in a phrase such as the intent of the One Seattle Plan and the implementing legislation is to remove barriers to building more housing, especially affordable housing. We do not support amendments that would increase barriers to developing more housing, such as number 108, the SDCI plan, and others that this body might identify.
Yeah.
And that way we don't go down the road of, then we don't get into a debate amongst ourselves of, well, if we're going to call out one that we don't like, should we call out another that we don't like? So that's that's an option.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Can I put myself?
Sure.
Okay. Nick?
Thanks. And yeah, I like that approach. And similarly, when we're talking about neighborhood centers, I think, we have a clear track record, and I raised this at the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee as well, where we've consistently supported the idea of more, not fewer neighborhood centers, and we can lay out all the reasons why and why we think it's a good idea to keep looking at that. More centers or more equitable access to housing services, jobs, opportunity, etc. So I think that's a good angle still, in my view. And then I just wanted to make a comment that I had also made at the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee, and that I've heard others make as well, as just the disappointment, I think, in some of the abrupt changes. Yes, we're really being focused to the changes that align with what we've been saying for a long time. But I think what it risks doing, having so many drop in such a late stage of the process after months of engagement, community-centered work, really careful consideration of the plan, having kind of this sort of rush at the end, in my view, just undermines the transparency and trust that the city and OPCD has been working to build. And so it's easy for us to kind of jump onto areas that we've called out as, oh, we've said this or we've been saying this, but I think some of these other ideas out there, we're seeing some council members wanting to poll neighborhoods on which option of this neighborhood center or which flavor of this would you like to see. That's the exact type of outreach that OPCD intentionally was trying to avoid, because we know that those that are showing up kind of at this phase in the process, it's a tactic. And I think, if we're going to ask community to show up early, show up often, we're going into neighborhoods, we're inviting people to come talk with the city, we really have to honor that. And we have to ensure that the finish line honors that same principle that guided the start. And that's what I think is really important for us to make sure we make clear in our comment letter. So appreciate staff kind of hearing that and including that as sort of the opening. And to Deanna's kind of maybe 5% criticism, I might offer it gets a little bigger than 5% in my view, just because it's very frustrating to see this happen at the end of a very long and now overdue process. So thank you.
60-20-20. Okay. Zio.
Yeah, I don't think I'd argue that this lands in the letter, but I do think a lot of the amendments that we're not entertaining because they're not appropriate to be amendments to the comp plan or to include in the land use code. And I just want to state that as another reason for like the long list of ones that we're not addressing. And I don't think that belongs in the letter, but I do think the fact that a significant number of those are mixed in with the more serious and more dramatic ones is also frustrating for all the reasons that Nick just outlined as far as where we
What
are.
are some of those topics that don't belong?
Addressing potholes.
If we don't put a policy in the governance.
Like, that's not the place. There are like very real, very valid places for that, and I believe that to be true, but it's just, it isn't the process or time for it. And that also, I think, undermines the legitimacy of the work being done and the processes that have been undertaken. But it maybe doesn't go in the letter. I just want to state it publicly.
Thanks, Theo. Let's see. Other folks have comments? Vanessa, should we kind of wrap up by just talking about how we go from here to the to a text, to a letter?
Yes, thank you. And thank you all. I know this was a lot of information, as was referenced, to throw at everybody the dog days of August. But moving on. So following today, staff is going to work on a first draft, which we will send out on Monday. I encourage everybody to read it. And if you aren't available to come to one of the meetings that we're going to be discussing that draft, please send me your comments. Please do not do a reply all, though. It's really important just to send your comments to staff, not to the full commission, because that constitutes a public meeting that isn't open to the public if we don't let people know. So we're going to review that first draft that's sent out on Monday, the 18th at our executive committee meeting on Tuesday. And we're going to continue to review at our land use committee meeting on Thursday, next Thursday. Then Monday, the 25th of August, staff will send out a final draft of the letter that we will discuss at our full commission meeting on the 28th of August. And then, drum roll, we will send our final draft out either the 29th or Tuesday, the 2nd of September. And I just want to reiterate that the meeting that we have on September 4th is, for those of you who were around the last time we approved a letter in a short period of time, is really just to vote on the letter. It is not to bring in new content. It is not to propose changes. So any changes that are to be entertained, and hopefully there will be none, but if there are changes proposed at the September 4th meeting, they need to be specific language that is proposed by a commissioner, and that we will vote on. If there are any proposed edits, the commission will vote on each of the edits. And I'm very hopeful that we can avoid doing that and that those edits will come sooner rather than later. And I'm just going to draw a little bit of a parallel to noting what Nick said about, making 11th hour changes does compromise the integrity of the plan, and making amendments on the fly to a letter that you all are approving does run the risk of having the letter not hold together and not be as cogent and concise as we all want it to be.
To hold ourselves to the same standard as people
higher
elected officials.
So again, be looking for a first draft on Monday. And if you're unable to attend one of the 2 committee meetings next week, please just send staff your comments and we will work it into the final draft.
Do you still want written comments, even if we can't come to some of those meetings? Like, when would you want our written comments for coming to some of those meetings?
Written comments would be great next week, once the draft comes out, the first draft.
And send them to you or all staff or?
Send it to me and then I'll share it
Yeah,
with John and Olivia.
And you
But
prefer specific inline edits rather than a comma box being like, right?
The specific inline comments are more helpful than comments like this needs to be stronger.
Yeah.
Or give some examples of the further down the line, closer that we get to approving the letter, that becomes kind of impossible for staff to flesh out, because I might think, well, I think it's stronger now, but somebody else might think, well, that actually isn't strong enough. That's not what I had in mind. So inline comments are the most helpful. If you can't help yourself and you want to do the bubble comments next week, that's fine. But after next week, we start to get into that time frame when we really need to button down the language.
Also, bubble comments have a higher likelihood of being missed or not responded to directly. It's just harder to answer an open-ended comment. So
We'll do our best though, if we get it. So that's all I
right.
have, Matt.
Okay. Great. Well, I think then if that is the case, then I would move to adjourn the meeting a little bit early. And so I guess with that, I adjourn the meeting.
Thanks all, and props to Matt for powering through chairing this meeting under duress on the health front. So hope you recover soon.
You know.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
thanks.
More power to you.
Bye. Go to bed now.
Let me tell you something that Jamie did towards the